Welcome to our second video on plant biology. In this video, we are going to be discussing plant tissues. But I would like to start by telling you or telling us the meaning of tissues. What is a tissue? A tissue or tissues are a group of similar cells. Look at that statement. Group of similar cells having common origin which perform similar function. Please take note of this. Group of similar cells having common origin which perform similar function. That is what we call a tissue. Basically in biology, we have plant tissues and animal tissues. When we talk about animal tissues, we talk about connective tissue, muscular tissue, epithelial tissues, etc. That will be in our animal biology video. Alright? But for now, I want to focus on plant tissues. And I want to classify plant tissues based on their on broad classification. Alright? So plant tissues are grouped into two. So I will use what I call flowcharts to explain plant tissues. So I will use flowchart. Number one group of plant tissues we have are called the meristematic tissues. Meristematic tissues. While the second group of tissues we have, we call them the permanent what? Tissues. What does this mean? It means that plant tissues are grouped into two. The meristematic and the what? The permanent tissues. What and what do we have in the meristematic tissues? I will still tell you the meaning of meristematic tissues, but I want to finish everything with flowchart before I start explaining. Now, the meristematic tissues we have what we call the apical meristematic tissue. So I will call this now apical meristematic tissue. Then we have intercalary. Intercalary. Let me write that well. Intercalary tissues. Then we also have the lateral. Then we have the primary. Then, let me mark this one out from here. We'll have the secondary meristematic tissues. Look at my flow chart. From plant tissues, we have meristematic and permanent tissues. For meristematic tissues, what do we have? We have the apical meristematic tissue, intercalary meristematic tissues, lateral in meristematic tissues, primary meristematic tissues, and what? Secondary meristematic tissues. Going over there to permanent tissues, permit me to bring it out like this. Okay? What and what do we have under the permanent tissues of plants? We have what is called simple. And we'll have complex. So under the permanent tissues in plants, we have simple permanent tissues and what? Complex permanent tissues. What and what do we have? Using my flow chart again, what and what do we have under the simple permanent tissues? We have the parenchyma. Parenchyma cells. Parenchyma. We have the sclerenchyma. Then we have the what? The collenchyma cells. Remember, I'm permitted to use the word cells because tissues are a group of what now? Similar cells having common origin and performing similar function. So I go again. From plant tissues, we have two groups of plant tissues: meristematic tissues and permanent tissues. Under the meristematic tissue, what do we have? We have apical meristematic tissue, primary meristematic tissue, lateral meristematic tissue, intercalary meristematic tissue, secondary meristematic tissues. For the permanent tissues, of course, permanent tissues are the ones that are fully differentiated, or we call them the mature tissues. The simple, under that, we have simple and complex. Under simple, what do we have? We have the parenchyma, the sclerenchyma, and the what? The cholenchyma tissues or cells. Of course, what do we have in the complex? What do we have in the complex? So I'll mark it up like this. We have two things or two group of tissues under the complex. We have the one we call the secretory tissues. Let me write this way. Let me write it this way. Let me bring it this way. Let me bring it this way. Let me bring it this way. So I said complex. For complex, we have the secretory tissues. And then we have the what now? I can call them the tissues of the vascular bundle, which is the xylem and the phloem and all that. So we have vascular tissues. Vascular what? Tissues. Under vascular tissues, there are two types here. The xylem and the what? Phloem. So by way of flow chart, we are able to classify plant tissues in the broad basis. So we said that we have two groups of plant tissues. One, meristematic, and second is what? Permanent. Under the permanent, what do we have? We have the simple, and we have the what? The complex. Under the simple, what do we have? Parenchyma, sclerenchyma, and cholenchyma. Please bear in mind, those in inborn environments, this flow chart is your exam question. About 10 questions in your past question, this flow chart will help you to get the answer. Do well to confirm from your past question, then you will check this flow chart and see that your questions have been answered using this my flow chart. So by the use of flow chart, it is easier for us to classify plant tissues. So we said under the simple we have the parenchyma, sclerenchyma, and cholenchyma. While under the complex we have what? The secretory tissues and the vascular tissues. Now, it is time to explain. I will start from this complex, then I will explain it down to other tissues. Starting with these secretory tissues. The secretory tissues are usually tubular. They are usually tubular in structure, or they are hollow. Say they are hollow or tubular. And what is their major function? The major function of the secretory tissues is the storage of food. Some of them are even involved in the manufacturing of food, but manufacturing of food is majorly given to what? Parenchyma. But for storage of food is the major function of the what now? The secretory tissues. I would say their major function is what? Storage of manufactured food. Storage of food. Coming to vascular tissues, it is important to state this, that the xylem is made up of, so I will continue with my flow chart. The xylem is made up of so many things. We have xylem parenchyma, so I'll write it here. Xylem what? Parenchyma. Xylem parenchyma. We have the ray cells. And we also have the what? The xylem vessels. I don't want you to join this plan. Let me bring it this way. So the xylem is made up of xylem parenchyma, the ray cells, then we also have the what? Of course, why am I saying xylem parenchyma? Xylem parenchyma because Parenchyma is found almost every part of plant body. So that's why we have xylem parenchyma. But it is important to note that xylem parenchyma is also called woody parenchyma, and that is why we say that xylem parenchyma is dead. They are not living cells. Of course, we have the xylem vessels. Xylem vessels. Alright. Xylem tracheids. Xylem tracheids, the xylem parenchyma, the red cells, and xylem vessels. All these make up the xylem. What about the phloem? Using my flowchart again. For the phloem, we have the following. Alright. We have the sieve tube. Very important. The sieve tubes. We have companion cells. Please take note of the companion cells. The one we have in past question is wrong. That is written like this. Companion. Please, this is not the right spelling of companion cells. Some students pick that as an answer, but I'm cautioning you now that this is very, very wrong. This is the spelling of companion cells. Companion. So I'll put the correct one here. Companion cells. So take note of this. So this is correct, why that is wrong. So the phloem is made up of what now? Sieve tubes, companion cells. I also have phloem parenchyma. Phloem parenchyma. We also have the phloem tracheids. So the major components that make up the phloem, what do we have? The sieve tubes, the parenchyma cells, and the companion cells. Why for the xylem, what do we have? We have the tracheids, we have the xylem parenchyma, we have the red cells, and we have the what now? The xylem vessels. With this flowchart, it becomes very easy to master plant tissues. Alright? Now, what are the functions of the xylem as part of complex tissue, a vascular complex tissue? Now, description will no longer be difficult. All what you waste time reading in your textbook, searching, I've given you that with what now? Flowchart. With the flowchart, it becomes easy. So if I want to describe the xylem, I can say that the xylem is one of the what now? Vascular complex tissues. Vascular complex tissues. Also the same thing again for phloem. Phloem is also a type of vascular complex tissue. But what is the function of the xylem? Very, very important. What is the function of the xylem? The function of the xylem functions for transportation of what now? Water and mineral salt. I repeat that. Function of the xylem, transportation of what now? Water and mineral salts or mineral nutrients. That is the function of the xylem. What about the function of the phloem? The phloem functions for translocation of manufactured food. Translocation of manufactured food. That is the function of the phloem. But please take note, by the means of this flowchart, take note of what and what components. I can call these ones components of the phloem, and I can call these things here components of the xylem. Meaning that xylem is made up of tracheids, red cells, xylem vessels, and xylem parenchyma. Also take note that I said that xylem parenchyma are dead. Another name for this is called woody. Woody what? Parenchyma. Woody parenchyma, and it is dead. It's not living. Having said so, under the complex tissues, remember where we started from? That we have two groups of plant tissues, the meristematic tissue and the permanent tissues. And we said that under the meristematic, we have all this: the apical, the lateral, and intercalary. Also the secondary. Then again, we have permanent tissues where we have the simple, which is all these three: collenchyma, sclerenchyma, and parenchyma. While under the complex, we have the secretory complex, that's why I brought it here, secretory and vascular tissues. Having said so, you please pause the video and copy out the flow chart because I want to rub off some of them and continue from my flow chart. All right. Coming here, meristematic tissues. I will just describe them very quickly, very briefly. Meristematic tissues, they have large cell vacuole, they have thin cell wall, all right. They have large nucleus, large cell vacuole, thin cell wall, all right. They are not fully differentiated, unlike the permanent tissues, all right. And under the meristematic, we say we have the apical meristematic tissues. From the word apical, apical is found in the root and shoot apices. I'll write it up here. Roots and shoot apices. Apices of plant. The root and the shoot apices of plant is where we have the apical meristematic tissues. It is important to state that meristematic tissues are in continuous cell division. When we talk about cell division, we have the mitosis and the meiosis. But what type of cell division does this one undergo? Of course, the mitosis. So meristematic tissues are in constant mitotic division. Of course, we have the apical meristematic tissues found where? In the root and shoot apices. So we can say that the apical meristematic tissues are found in the growing regions of plants. Of course, these two are the growing regions of plants. Having said so, I would love to rub off one part, so you can pause the video now and copy out the flowchart because I want to show us certain cells that are found in the apical meristematic tissues. All right, so permit me to rub off this part and continue with apical. All right, moving on now. Moving on. For the apical meristematic tissue, very important. There are three important cells of the apical meristematic tissues that I must talk about. One is called the dermatogenes. Second one is called the periblem. And the third one is called the plerome. What are these three? Three important cells of the apical meristematic tissues. The dermatogen cells gives rise to what? They give rise to what? They are the ones that gives rise to epidermis. They give rise to the epidermis. What about the periblem? The periblem gives rise to the cells of the cortex. So they give rise to the cortex, while the plerome gives rise to the what? Vascular bundles. Vascular what? Bundles of plants. I take that again. I said with my flow chart, apical meristematic tissues have three important cells. What are these? Dermatogenes, periblem, and plerome. Very important. And I said that the dermatogenes gives rise to the epidermis, while the periblem gives rise to the what now? Cortex. And the plerome, of course, gives rise to the what now? Vascular bundles. Very important. Having said so, this is very important for apical meristematic tissues. Having said so, please bear in mind there will be a second video that will feature, there will be a continuation of this one where I will draw some of these tissues and talk about them. Then again, remember we talked about the intercalary, the primary, The primary meristematic tissues, together with the intercalary, gives rise to what we call primary permanent tissues. Primary permanent tissues. While the secondary meristematic tissues, together with the lateral tissues, differentiate into what we call the secondary permanent tissues. Alright? So, having said so, coming to the simple tissues, the first guy I have there is parenchyma. I would like to talk about the parenchyma briefly, and that will be all for this video. So that in the second video that will follow this one, the second video will continue. Then I will talk about their structures, location where they are found, functions, and that will be all for plant tissues. Or there could be the third video, which will also talk about the plant hormones, or we also call them the phytohormones, where we have the auxin, the gibberellins, the cytokinins, the ethylene, all of them, all plant hormones. So it will be in the second or the third video. But for now, after the parenchyma, that's all for this first video. So that in the second video, we'll continue. Alright, for the parenchyma cells, parenchyma tissues, very important, very important. These ones have what we call dense cytoplasm. Dense cytoplasm. Please watch out for this word. Very important. It is the strength of the examiner. When they want to ask you questions on parenchyma tissue, they will ask you, or they will describe and ask you, what tissue have you described? Once you hear dense cytoplasm, of course, meristematic tissues also have dense cytoplasm. Also, parenchyma have dense cytoplasm. Dense cytoplasm is not all. It is important to state that these cells are living cells. They are made up of what now? Living cells. They are not dead. Parenchyma is living, made up of living cells, and it has dense cytoplasm. Now, the parenchyma, like I said, is found almost every part of plant body. It is very important to state that, very important for me to state that the plant parts, or the plant parts of plant body that contains the parenchyma tissues or cells bears the great weight of the plant body. So let me put that here now. Plants or plant parts that have the parenchyma tissues or cells bears the great weight. So I'll put it here. Bears the great weight of plant body. They bear the great weight of the plant body. Very important. Please take note. It means that how heavy a plant is, how weighty, how heavy a plant is determined by the parenchyma cells or parenchyma tissues. Remember, I said if I say cells, I'm correct, because tissues are a group of what now? Similar cells having common origin, which perform similar function. So please take note on parenchyma tissues that they are living cells. The parts of plants that have the tissues bears the great weight of the plant body. And they're also made up of what now? Dense cytoplasm. That is much we can take for this video, so that in the second video we continue from where we stop. We describe other tissues and possibly draw their structures. Also, there will be a third video which will feature the plant hormones such as auxins, gibberellins, cytokinins, etc. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, remember to share, so that your friends will benefit just as you have benefited. Thank you, and see you in our next video.